Hi, my name is Paul Bands, and I'm the Regional Manager for Key Mobility. And I'm here to talk to you today about a fantastic new product we have called the Focus CR. It's our new complex rotational tilt in space. We feel at Key Mobility that we've made some significant breakthroughs in tilt in space technology, and we want to share those with you today. Three things that I really would like for you to get out of this in-service is, number one, our product is while aesthetically pleasing, is an extremely durable product. Number two is that the product is extremely secure for both the caregiver and, more importantly, for the person that's in the chair. And then number three, that it's extremely easy to adjust when you're trying to make those critical adjustments for things like center of gravity and all those good things. But let's go ahead and dig into the product a little bit, or to the in-service. What I'd like to do is just to spend just a few moments talking about today's technology. You have basically two systems. You have a single arc system, which is exemplified in the Invacare Solera as well as the Quickie Iris, and then a high pivot system, which is exemplified in the Ottobock products or the PDG Fuse. The first system with Invacare and Sunrise uses what's called a single arc system. So you have a center point or single point of rotation, and you have a control path on the bottom in the form of sometimes a cradle, or what they call a rocker arm. All right, but in essence, you've got a controlled arcuitous path that you follow. The next system is what we call a high pivot system, which the other two chairs tend to use. Similar concept, but you have a higher pivot point, and the seating frame actually swings underneath. But again, it's using a control path very similar to the other system. But what you're doing is you're really achieving what we're calling a simple rotational system. So let's talk about the benefits of that, because there's a reason why they were designed that way. The first part is that, and the main part of consideration is that it just makes the chair more stable, but it also provides a much shorter wheelbase. So why is that important? Well, number one, it's important because you have a product that can actually navigate through the environment. So in a lot of cases with those longer bases, it was really difficult for people, especially in smaller homes, to be able to get around furniture and things. So now you have greater access to your environment. All right, the other side is that the shorter wheelbase makes it just that much more maneuverable. So for, let's say, an elderly caregiver, it's a lot easier to take the product and to push it along in that environment. The second part is that it's a lot easier for the caregiver to reposition the patient. In the old systems, and let me show you on this chair, in the old systems, when you started to tilt somebody back, especially if they were heavier, you had to have a lot of upper body strength, especially not just bringing them down, but more so trying to bring them back up in a position. When you have somebody working on a control path, it not only can fit on a shorter base, but it's also a lot easier, because when the center of mass and the center of rotation are perfectly aligned, the same amount of force is required to push the person throughout the entire rotational period, so to speak. The last thing, and probably what I consider the most important, is the fact that it's less disturbing or less disorienting to the person that's in the chair. So imagine if you're sitting in one of the chairs that you're sitting in now, and I were to sneak up behind you, and I were to yank the chair back. In a lot of cases, that throws off your sense of balance, and it makes you extremely uncomfortable because you feel like you're going to fall. In the center rotation system, when those are perfectly aligned, your center of mass and your center with the center of rotation actually makes you feel extremely comfortable through that entire arc, because you don't feel that sense of losing your balance. So a lot of significant breakthroughs were done on the single rotation system. Now, the challenge you run into with the single rotation system is the fact that the center of mass and the center of gravity have to be perfectly aligned in order to achieve those benefits. When those don't happen, and there's a lot of variables that can happen to a chair, so imagine on this chair, it's not just the center of mass of the person in the chair that you have to consider. You have to consider all the positioning pieces. So you could have a heavy foot box on there. You could have a heavy seating system with a very complex headrest system, like a dynamic headrest system that adds weight to the product. That's going to throw off your center of mass relative to the center of rotation. When those things are off kilter, a couple things happen. Your system, if it's front tippy, will end up slamming forward. So that's disorienting to the person in the chair, but it's also disorienting to the caregiver, because now they have to brace themselves every time they actuate the tilt. And in the same regard, if the system is too tippy backwards, you end up slamming into the back. All right, and again, it makes it that much more difficult now for the caregiver they have to use a lot of upper body strength to pull the person back up. What we feel that we've achieved is that we've now made it a lot easier to adjust the chair and to eliminate that slamming effect. So what I'd like to show you today is what's called our complex rotational system. We were able to achieve that through what we call a dual arc guides. So now instead of having one single point, you have 2 points of rotation, and then now the center of mass can float between these 2 lines. So what does that mean in layman's terms or in general terms? Because you have a dual arc guide, the system, instead of slamming forward or slamming backwards when misaligned, the system is now going to settle in between those 2 points of the arc. That's what we call our secure tilt feature. So regardless if the chair is out of alignment, the caregiver and the person in the chair are secure in knowing that it's going to settle into a position. Now the other great thing about it is that, and this is what we call our smart tilt feature, is that the product is actually designed to where if it's off center, it's easily to identify where it's off center and how to adjust it so that you get it right the first time. All right? And a lot of that is achieved through making these center of gravity adjustments, and I'm going to show you that here in just a moment. So if we look at our flip chart, we're going to talk a little bit about the CG adjustments. First thing I want to bring up, we talked about how easy it is to adjust the product. You'll notice that you're only pulling out 4 fasteners in a lot of cases to achieve the same thing that you have to pull 12, 8, or 12 out of competitive products. That's significant from a time perspective. If you're in a clinic that's a high-paced clinic, you don't have a lot of time to really spend making those adjustments to make sure that the chair is right. Same token, if you're an ATP and you're out at the person's home, you don't want to have a lot of washers and nuts and bolts laying all over the place trying to make adjustments. You want to be able to get in, make the adjustments, make the client happy, and then get on to your next appointment. So what we'll do is we're first going to show you the tilt stability. So if you look at the upper seat frame, and I'll show you on the chair in a moment, all you're doing is simply pulling out 2 bolts. All right, so the way that the system's set up is that it optimally rests at 20 degrees along that control path. If it's off, let's say if it's off to 30 degrees, you know that the chair is more tippy forward. We're going to be providing you with a technical guide that you're going to be able to go in. There's going to be a one-to-one relationship to what that angle of tilt is, to what type of adjustment you have to make and how far you have to go. So for instance, let's say for sake of the argument that our chair is at a 30-degree tilt. So we know by looking on your matrix that you're going to have to adjust this forward about 1 inch. So what happens, you're just going to take out these two bolts, and now your system, there's a 6-inch track in the back of this that you're going to slide along to make the adjustment, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to move it 1 inch forward in the system, and by the way, this bracket allows you to do 1/2-inch increments so that you can really fine-tune that adjustment to make sure that it's going to work properly for you. So once you have it aligned, just simply put the bolts in, and obviously you'll tighten them down on both sides. And now you've made your adjustment, that's it. This is an adjustment that can actually be made with the client in the chair. So you're not, if somebody's completely dependent, you don't have to worry about putting them in a Hoyer lift, taking them out, readjusting back canes, readjusting the front frame like we just did, as well as moving a cradle back on the frame, moving wheels back. In this case, we made one simple adjustment. Now in some cases, and this is okay, but in some cases when you move the entire seat frame forward, the chair becomes a little bit tippy. So anytime that you have the receiver for the hanger out in front of the caster, you have that potential of being a little bit more tippy forwards, especially when you're going down an incline like a ramp. So what we've done is we've made another very simple adjustment, which is our front stability adjustment. So basically you're taking that caster wing, you're taking out 1 bolt, and I'll show you that in a moment, but you're taking 1 bolt and you're telescoping that forward. All right, and you're going to telescope forward that 1 inch, same as you did on the upper seat frame. So what you're doing is you're going to remove the rear wheel. And by the way, this is a 1-tool adjustment. You don't have to have another wrench back behind the frame. So you just take your 1 tool, adjust it, slide it forward an inch, or making sure that it's perfectly aligned with this post, and then you're done. That's really it. Now, when adjusting the rear stability, if you have to make that adjustment backwards, yes, you can move the axle. You have 7 inches of axle plate adjustment in the back. But again, it's very simple. It's just 4 bolts. You slide it and you move it back if you need it. The majority of the time, though, you're going to be able to get away with either just telescoping the front part of the frame, whether on the bottom or the seat frame. So I hope you feel that by seeing that we've made that adjustment a lot easier, and it's a lot easier to actually be able to do it in the field. I'd like to spend a couple moments now just on some key product features of the product. I think you'll find these really advantageous for the caregivers, the clients, as well as for the folks that are working with them. The first part is what we call our inset rockers. A lot of wheelchairs are designed where the rockers, while you see ours are inset, they're actually aligned with the side frame as well as the seat rail. So what does that do? So from an aesthetic standpoint, you'll notice that the rocker looks almost buried into the frame from the side feature. So from an aesthetic standpoint, we want to minimize all the hardware looking features that we can on the chair so that you're seeing more of the design element of the chair, and ultimately you're seeing more of the person in the chair, which is most important. But from a functional standpoint, we're going to do a couple things to make your folks' life a lot easier. So let's say you're looking to mount a lot of different hardware, say for a communication device, or you want to mount a, your seat or an adductor, let's say. You have an open seat frame from which to do that. There's not a lot of interference where you might see it from the bracket that attaches the seat frame to the rocker arm. The second part is that, and we don't have it available yet, it'll be available in time, is a recline option. So on the recliner, when you're coming back and you have a rocker that is in line with the back canes, which in a lot of cases they are, it really limits your ability to do the recline option. So you'll notice for us, you can, regardless of where you are in space, you will be able to get 180 degrees of recline, which is significant when it comes to different positioning goals as clinicians or as an ATP that you're trying to achieve. All right. Finally, and I want to point this out, is that for those folks that want to be able to truly get the 7 inches of travel of this plate, is that because of the way this is designed, especially when you're trying to do a self-propel option, is that you now have the ability to move this without interference of your mounting plate to your rocker. All right. So the axle plate now can be moved freely along that path, being able to optimize the condition of the chair so that you can self-propel and do the things you want to do functionally. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the tilt lock, and this is pretty significant compared to what our competitors are doing. We actually have the teeth mechanism is actually buried up underneath the rocker arm, and it's very predictable. So instead of having a pin trying to get in and out of multiple placements, you have this part right here, okay? So you have our, if you want to call it, pin that actually disengages and engages. All right, and it's going to be predictable and it's going to fully engage every time. The second part is like with what Invacare does, which has a nice durable product, but those teeth tend to grind as you go through that cycle a lot, and things like food tend to get caught in that gearing mechanism, where with ours being buried up underneath of it, you're not going to really see a lot of that happening. So what we call food glue. And when you have the food glue, it tends to not want to go smoothly through that arcuitous path. When it comes to the tilt lock, we're going to give you 2 options. The first option is a foot actuator. All right. The second one, and this is pretty significant, is the fact that we're going to have a single lever option as well. We're only going to use one cable, and we're going to line the cable with the back tubes and along the frame so that the cables stay out of the way, so that they're not getting caught on things and causing interference when you're trying to mount additional items on the chair. Ultimately, it's a much better design to keep a lot of that stuff out of the way, but still give you consistent performance out of the product. The next part I'd love to talk to you about and this is also a significant part of the chair, is that, talk about the roller bearings. We talked about the product being both aesthetically pleasing and durable. I think you'll find that this is an extremely durable feature. The majority of our competitors end up using plastic bushings. Why is that important? Well, sealed bearings are made to roll in a low friction environment and are very consistent and predictable over long periods of time. So while our system, if you notice on here, is extremely easy to remove relative to our competitors if you do have to change it out, but more times than not, these are going to be durable enough to last through the entire life of the product. So that means less service calls and less discomfort and dissatisfaction by the caregiver and the client. Next one I want to talk about, and we'll show you these, we have a couple of these actually on the chair, is we have new tire options. In a lot of cases when you use smaller tires or smaller casters, you want to make sure that they're as wide as possible so that when you're going, you have in different environments, so you're going over gravel, you're going over grass, etc., thinner tires tend to roll or dig into that rolling surface. Well, that's great if you're on hard floors. A thinner tire provides less friction, but outdoors in a lot of cases, you want something wider to be able to float over those surfaces versus digging in. So we're offering a 6x2-inch polycaster, and we'll show you that on the chair in a minute, as well as two 16-inch rear wheels. And this is, by the way, the smallest rear wheel, so you're getting a larger rear wheel than, let's say, a 12-inch, but you're still able to achieve a lot of the great seat-to-floor heights that you want to achieve. So you have a 16-inch rear wheel with a 2.125 wide tire. We have a poly that's great inside, all right, and it's a flat-free option. It has a little bit of tread, but not enough to really track into the house, as well as a pneumatic option if you want a little bit different ride and feel out of the chair, as well as if you want to do airless inserts, but like the idea of having that additional tread. So we're giving you folks a lot of options as far as tires are concerned. The next part that I want to talk to you about are our anti-tippers. We have what we're calling our Easy Swivel anti-tippers. In a lot of cases with anti-tips, especially on a chair that requires more of a heavy-duty anti-tip, you tend to have the ones that are use a detent button to swivel it up, which is a little bit harder for a caregiver to do consistently and repeatedly throughout the day. So we're providing one that is spring-loaded, easy to pull back, but very durable. All right, it has a lot of travel to make sure that you're truly disengaging, and it's very easy to flip. It's just really that simple. So it's one of those things where doesn't really become an encumbrance to the consumer or to the caregiver working with them. Next part I'd like to talk about are the frame depth and the frame width adjustments. There's a unique design in this, and I'd like to show you graphically on this flip chart, is that instead of putting a new telescoping piece into the front of the seat rail, we're actually attaching it in the center. Why is that important? Well, in a lot of cases when you're trying to do mounts on the front of the seat frame, you want that the consistency of the 1-inch tubing so that it translates easy into whatever hardware you're using. All right, you really don't want to have to mess around with using different hardware on the front versus the back, etc. The second thing that's significant on the product is that we were keeping it one color. So that way, if you want to actually go in and stock a few of these to help service your clients, or if you're using them for rental, for instance, that way you can buy a couple sets of them, and you're always going to have the right color in stock. Last thing I want to talk about is that we're going to offer it as short, medium, and long. And we're going to have it overlap 2 inches. So you're going to have 14 to 18 inches, 16 to 20, and 18 to 22. So it's going to give you that much more flexibility, especially if you have clients that are teenagers, let's say, and tend to grow. It's going to give you the ability to do it easily. But in a lot of cases, you're going to because we're giving you 4 inches of adjustment, more times than not, you're actually going to be able to use one set and just simply go out and make the adjustment versus having to buy new parts all the time, like strut tubes, when we talk about the width growth. So let's go ahead and talk about that width growth. Again, and to keep it simple to remember, we're using the same measurements, so 14 to 18, 16 to 20, and 18 to 22. Again, very simple. We're going to offer you the minimal amount of parts to make the adjustments. All right, so it's really just a couple different fasteners on each of the internal struts and you're done. Very simple, not a lot of parts to adjust, very easy to adjust. Okay, a couple things that I want to talk about at the end is that, and there's some significant features I think you'll like. First one I want to talk about is our fold-down stroller handle. You'll notice that it's a very minimal design, again, going to the design element and the overall aesthetics of the product, but we have an extremely small, durable knuckle that folds very tight. So when you're trying to transport the chair, you can get it into very tight spaces and still be able to travel with it. The other thing I want to talk about and mention again is all our seat-to-floor height options. We can give you anywhere from a 13-inch seat-to-floor height for those folks that want to self-propel, all the way upwards of a 19-inch seat-to-floor height. All right, in a lot of cases you're putting thicker cushions and things in there to help with that in terms of the higher heights, but we're giving you a broad range in which to choose from. Last part I just want to bring up is please don't forget about a lot of the things that have made Key great. First part is I want to talk about the hanger. We still have the best hanger in the industry, lifetime warranty in the upper frame, but we're also offering you half-inch adjustment, especially on the 90 degree, which is very prevalent in this type of chair. Half-inch adjustment, especially for folks that are having significant issues with foot placement, it really gives you the ability to fine-tune that adjustment and just makes it a lot easier to achieve your objectives as a clinician or an ATP. The second part I want to talk about, though, is let's talk about the armrest. We probably have the best single post height adjustable armrest. Remember that we've got it that it bolts into the frame so that it doesn't swivel, less service calls, more durable, especially on a product like this, which is going to have to be more rugged over a long period of time. We also have the tapered post as well as a tapered receiver. The tapers on both of these make it very tight tolerance. And then also remember, we have our reversible upper armrest, half-inch increment adjustment, and this part is welded, all right? So it's not going to come loose over time. When you're dealing with a population that tends to use this type of chair, you want something that's durable. Folks, I really appreciate your time today. I hope you feel that we've achieved our objective in showing you a chair that is most secure for the client as well as for the caregiver. It's simple to adjust and is aesthetically pleasing and durable at the same time. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please let us know.